Hi, I'm Jeff Miller.
I'm Anthony Navarro, and welcome to Talk Out Loud, where we share the LGBTQIA+ narrative, one story at a time. On this episode of Talk Out Loud, we're here with Kalyela Josephs, better known to her clients as Coach K. Coach K is a spiritual life coach that is helping the LGBTQ+ community fully embrace their spirituality and sexuality. Growing up in a conservative family, she was taught that being a queer person was not okay. When trying to express her sexuality in a parochial religious environment, everything that she worked for was almost taken away from her. Eventually, she learned that she could live as an out person, but that just wasn't enough. She had to go back and heal herself from past traumas in order to blossom into the person she is today. Let's hear Coach K's story.
Well, hey, Coach K, how's it going today?
It's going good. It's going good. How are you doing today?
I could not be better myself. I am so excited to be able to be with you and to get to know you better today.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for, both for the invitation. I'm honored to be here.
Thanks. And we're talking to you right now, and you are on the East Coast, not too far. I'm trying to think, actually, you're in the Carolinas, right?
Yes, you did good. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Did you grow up in the Carolinas?
No, I've actually been living in Charlotte now for about 10 years. Originally from Brooklyn, New York, and left there around about 10, then came down to the South. So lived in Savannah, Atlanta, Jacksonville, Florida. And then when I went to start playing college basketball and stuff like that, I found North Carolina to be the home. So I'm now Charlottean for 10 years.
That's a great start for basketball right there. Yeah. Wait, out of curiosity, what position did you play?
I play small forward, right? So got a little dirty down there, but yes, small forward.
Oh, nice. You grew up Hispanic and Catholic, right?
Yeah. So my parents are from Panama City in Cologne. And they moved to Brooklyn, New York around in the 70s. And, the religion culture of most Hispanics are Catholic Christian. So I grew up Catholic to around about 13.
So growing up in there in Brooklyn, it wasn't just on Sundays. It was was it in your neighborhood as well too? Did you feel like it was in the culture that you lived in as well, or?
Yeah, definitely in the culture. I went to a Catholic school, so I went through confirmation, and I hear you laughing too, right?
Yep.
At 7 is a big thing.
Oh, yeah.
Went through confirmation and wore uniform and with the priests and all of that good stuff. So it was embedded in the culture, and it became like an everyday thing, and outside of Sundays as well.
How was it growing up? Did you ever have conversation, or was there any dialogue about gay people or queer people in your household or in your community?
Yeah, just a little bit of background. So queer community, gay community in the Panamanian culture, or mostly Hispanic culture, but specifically in the Panamanian culture, was, negatively viewed and was illegal. So it wasn't something that definitely parents or family members would be proud of. And at that time, I really didn't see an example of gay people around, or, queer people around. I think maybe seeing some childhood kids that had a little bit of flamboyancy, and parents will make a comment, negatively, a negative comment about how the boy child is acting a little bit feminine in such a way. So it brought a negative light. And it was one of those things, oh, boys don't touch boys, girls don't play, touch girls. Or, if they overhear you saying that you want to play house. And I know I was a big one for this. I was like, I want to be the dad. And I was like, no, you cannot be the dad. You have to be the mom. So from that, you could pick up a little bit of that energy that maybe this is not the right thing to be doing. So yeah, I would say it was definitely kind of embedded in the culture, but comments were made, and it was negative. It was not too positive.
That negative connotation that it had, did that come from the Catholicism that was embedded in the culture, or was it just culturally not accepted, or do you think it was maybe a little bit of both?
Yeah, I want to say the latter, maybe a little bit of both. Definitely, and I kind of understand this a little bit more now. A lot of our belief systems stem from that core religion, or what we're taught. So one, Catholicism, teaching that, homosexuality is abomination. And that's kind of the energy that my mom picked up, saying, hey, no, that's not right, that piece. But then also culturally, I noticed that as I grew older, it was this whole infatuation of what would people say if people knew my daughter was gay? The whole perfectionist piece of, I want my daughter to do this and, be girly or be involved in these activities. And I think it was culturally would be an embarrassment if it was said that, oh, your child is, gay. So I think both of those kind of definitely weighed in on me.
When I'm able to listen to somebody else's story, I'm able to observe things differently than I in my own life because I'm not necessarily attached to it in the same direct way. And I'm just thinking about like also that, we have these conversations about gender and sexuality and how they intersect, and just about like that, you don't have to be gay or, or lesbian or, transgendered or non-binary. Like the fact that we at such a young age, we tell men or we tell boys that you have to be tough and you have to be strong. And then if somebody who's female maybe rises up and wants to be leadership or a role model in the family or, take that's also not just necessarily bound to sexuality, that, to encourage people to fully immerse themselves in all of what they are as far as feelings, thoughts, empathy. And then I don't know, like sometimes, not to go down a long road about like social power structure things, but just how that sometimes we associate that with weakness or it's just these things with compassion and stuff like that, I think there were principles that we could just do about. Like I think about Christianity or Catholicism and some of these good things that I've learned from that, but then also sometimes it can be in direct conflict with the power structures we have in the family unit or in tribalism and stuff like that. But just kind of a side conversation there. But
yeah, no, I think I totally agree with what you're saying, because we have to, we're groomed to believe in something, right? And majority of us have been in some form or fashion in some type of religion, most likely in Christianity here in the States, and it informs our culture. It informs how one parents in the household, and it's just, I can just remember, like when you talk about when a child wants to express themselves in gender identity, and I can remember telling my mom, "Hey, I want to play basketball." And I remember I was like, 7 or 8 years old. And she was like, no, only gay people play basketball. Or just there was a stigma around it. And, basically trying to prevent me in something that I had passion around or wanted to do at a young age because of what was culturally deemed as appropriate, or this is what gay people do, or they play these particular sports or things of that nature. So I think like when you do that, you deprive, at that point, I still played basketball, but it deprives a child of really tapping into what they want to do when they grow up. So things like that.
Yeah. So when I was growing up too, in, I would say grade school, more like into junior high, I was encouraged to play sports, and it just never was what I really wanted to do. It was never something that I really felt passionate about. And it wasn't until I got into high school till I realized that I didn't have to do that. I found other things that were really more inspiring to do, like doing theater and student government and like that kind of stuff. And I think now, like looking back, I don't think there was ever really a conversation in our house about it, but it would have been like if we would just pay attention to what we're like kids are responding to versus just being like, oh, we just have to put them in, that you're a boy, you're going to play soccer, in the spring, and you're going to play basketball in the, winter, and you're going to play football in the fall. And it's like, it doesn't work like that. What you should be doing is following the child's, watching what they're responding to. Like, I'm just thinking, so Jeff and I, our nephew, he's like a year and a few months old, and well, older than that now. Oh my gosh, he's almost 2. Anyway, but he loves to dance. And I said to my sister, I was like, I think when he's old enough, you should just put him in a dance class. I mean, not for nothing. It's just like, he really likes to do it. It'll be something that he can, artistically or creatively express himself, and just encourage those behaviors that, the kids are showing.
Yeah. Yeah. And allowing them to have that exposure.
Yeah. And So I'm curious. So I'm hearing your mom says no, but you just foreshadowed to the fact that you know that you did play. So did you keep pushing it? How did you get yourself on the court?
Yeah, so her thing was she had me like in ballet and cultural dances, and I was like, even though I was good at it, I was like, no, this is what I want to do. I want to play basketball, and I was actually good at it. So I think around maybe middle school or high school, that's when I really just opened myself up and say, hey, I really just related my passion and say, hey, I really want to play basketball. And I think it wasn't until like I got a college scholarship, then that's when she realized, oh, you know what, this kid may actually be good, and I don't have to pay for school. Yeah, you go ahead and, play basketball. All right. So I think that's when she started to kind of open up to it just a little bit. She still at that time still had the struggle and the stigma around it. But she just knew that, hey, let me let her play. Let me let her do her thing. And I'm glad that she actually leaned into it. And I actually leaned into it because it was probably one of the greatest, you hear a lot of people talk about sports and the life lessons and leadership and all these different things that we learn from it. And I carry a lot of those lessons today. So what if she would have just really hunker down and say, no, you cannot play because of my own fears and perceived notions, what that would have looked like.
Yeah. I'm glad you followed that. You played in high school. You went to a Christian high school, right?
Yes. Went to Christian high school in Jacksonville, Florida.
Did you ever have anything where you felt like you had to be careful about people finding out like a secret you had inside of you or anything like that at all with high school?
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely. We have a little bit of a secret. So when I went to the school basically on a basketball scholarship, and I think that was a time that I started to kind of really lean in and find my own identity. So I knew from like a young age that, hey, something's up. I really had like little girls and at maybe in the single digits around 7, 8. But around this time, like 13, 14, it was like, okay, that girl is beautiful. Right. And wanting to kind of pursue those feelings. And I can remember, I think it was my freshman or sophomore year, that I had a little girlfriend at the time, and like most of us is talking on the phone, and you hang up, and you hang up, and I think right, it's so cute, and I think her mother at the time picked up the phone and I guess possibly recorded our conversation, took the recording to the principal, and the principal basically went on a scavenger hunt to find who's Kalyela, where's this kid I need to find because something's going on and it's not right. So they brought my best friend into the office and said, my best friend was like, no, you got the wrong person. And then they found me and he brought me into the office, sat down and said, hey, I have a recording of you and you talking to your girlfriend. And I'm just going to ask you this. Are you gay? And if you are, you already know the consequences of that. You can't be here and we're going to call your mom. And at that moment, I already knew. Like I was like, no, I'm not gay. I'm not gay. No, what are you talking about? I have a boyfriend. Knowing good and well, I didn't have a boyfriend. And he said, okay, well, you're going to need to stop hanging around that person. If I see you all together, that lets me know otherwise. So at that moment, I couldn't really even, you walk through the hallway, you can't even talk to this person or anything, and rumors are going around school that you're gay, your basketball team, your coach, everyone is kind of now on alert for you to make sure you're not around this person. So I think that, that kind of damaged me, definitely damaged me. And that was the big lie. And I spilled into spaces of trying to have a boyfriend to have a cover up, or even telling my girlfriend. Yeah. And have my girlfriend say, hey, although we're together, you need to find somebody to date to take the attention off of us so that, we could be in a relationship. So was that the answer? No. But at the time, you're trying to graduate high school and not lose scholarships and things of that nature. And most, if anything, not have my mom find out. So that whole 4 years that I was there, she didn't know anything about me being gay, the incident that happened. So that was like a big secret that I had to hold in within myself.
Wow. It's a big weight to carry.
That is, I mean, and I think about, like high school, your teen. So it's not just high school. It's also basketball. Like in high school, that's everything, I had like some youth group stuff that like was kind of like my outlet as well too, until that was no longer okay. But to have that taken away, like that's everything for a 14, 15-year-old girl to have that an adult. You grow up real quick when you have to have those conversations,
Yeah.
You had your friend, you were telling her like, how we got to make sure we're safe about this. Was there anyone that you could look up to that was older than you to be like, this is what I'm going through? Like anybody to like acknowledge, like to, I don't know, encourage you at all?
Yeah, I had one of my teammates. They were a senior. All they were open. They were out and open, and looked up to them. It's like, oh man, I think she gave us. I think it's one of those people when you see people, you're like, oh, that's what I am. So when we saw her, we just knew. Like I knew. Like I was like, man, she's gay. And I'm feeling the same way. And I think she took me under her wing to kind of just say it's okay. But that only lasted for a little bit because she graduated, and I had, along with others, had like 3 more years to go. How do I navigate that space? So I think she was instrumental as sometimes being a representation or just kind of showing you like, oh man, like that person's showing you who you are. And I think that's what the lesson that she played in at that time.
It just comes up so often when we talk about these stories on the show, and it's like representation or that visibility of being able to see yourself in someone else, just how important that is, because it allows you to then know that you're not alone, that there are other people out there like you. And it just goes to show, it's just, how important that is, and how important it is to continue to see and have like a strong visibility for LGBTQI people in the world. So after high school, you leave and you go away to college. Where did you find yourself going to college?
I found myself, I was still in Florida, but I went to kind of like a small junior college, a little bit in the country. So found myself going out in the country with some cows and like one supermarket, but I loved playing basketball, and I had got a scholarship to go. So my mom was gracious enough to say, okay, you know what? I believe in you. You seem like you're good at this basketball thing. Plus, I don't have to pay. So you go ahead and do your thing. So yeah, that's where I found myself in college.
And would you say this was a more progressive environment than you were in before?
I would say, yeah. I think it was, neutral in a sense. It wasn't a religious Christian college or anything like that. And I actually went to 2 colleges, so we'll probably talk a little bit about that. So the junior college I went to was pretty much open, diverse, a group of students. So it was very kind of, in a sense, nothing was really spoken about. I think that was the opportunity, was I was able to step in and be free and connect with other athletes that were openly, queer, and really step into that and say, oh man, I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing. But actually my mom, that's when she found out that I was gay. So she always had suspicions and made comments about it. But I just remember there was maybe shortly thereafter, maybe a couple months after I came into school, she got wind of, I don't know how she got wind of it. She keeps her mouth pretty close knit to this day.
Really?
I think she found out from some of the rumors that were going on at school. And she reached out to me and came pick me up and said, hey, I heard that you're gay. And that was a tough moment. I'll say that it was a tough moment.
Yeah. So you go to school there for 2 years, and then you move on to another college after that then?
Yeah. So I I had continued playing basketball. That's where I found myself in the Carolinas. Went to a historically Black college in here in the Carolinas, and found that school was a Christian-based school. So it was, although we had queer individuals on campus, I think it was still in doctrine. You're walking around the way you are, but it still was not affirming. It wasn't affirming. It wasn't open. It didn't have any type of resources of, how can we be openly as we are, right? Yeah. So the only really tribe that I had was my basketball team, and individuals that friends that I made around school. But the institution itself wasn't a proponent of LGBTQ or providing any type of resources or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Was there a reason why you went to that college? Did it have anything to do with you coming out or, sort of being outed to your mom?
No, I think the deeper reason as to why I chose to go to that college. For me, I went to a Christian high school, but it was predominantly white, and the first junior college followed suit. And for me being African American, I felt like there was a little bit of a void missing. I wanted to be around more diverse, in that sense, be around my tribe. So I just wanted to learn more about Black culture and just just be within a different environment. So that's what was the really driver for me choosing to go to a different college, and specifically that college, like a HBCU, to be in a space that was more diverse.
I know for me, I went to a Christian college as well, Catholic college. I started there like in the late 90s, and it was like the first time for me to be exposed to a lot of, queer students on campus. And I think the only difference of my experience and your college experience, in terms of what you just said about being affirming or not, is the campus was extremely affirming. There were out queer teachers, there were out queer students, and there were gender studies and women's studies and queer studies classes. There were organizations for LGBTQ youth. It was a really unique sort of experience, because not that I had a tumultuous experience in going to a Catholic high school, but just none of that stuff existed. And I was so shocked to see that. And what also was really interesting about the school I went to was the diversity on campus. There was just people from all over the world that came to this school. And there was like so many different faiths and religions of, the student body that were there. It was just like this really big melting pot of people. I'm really grateful for that, because I feel like for me, it gave me like this sense of like, okay, like I have my faith structure. I know what it is. It maybe doesn't fit exactly into Catholicism, but I know that there are people that love and support me along the way. So I know other people now have that, especially that we've talked to on the show, they've had similar experiences that you've had in college. And it's got to be really tough to you like say like, hey, this is who I am. It's okay to say who I am, but it's almost like saying you can't act on who you are or be who you are.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing, is to have representation. And when you go into the college, it's like the don't ask, don't tell rule, until it became outlawed a couple of years ago. It's we see you walking around and we can make an assessment and we see your behavior, but we're not a proponent. We're not advocating, for you to be the way you are. And that's, to me, that's like omission, like a lack of support, right? A lack of support that you don't have certain classes that teach you about how to navigate in this world, or resources that, around mental health, or all of us, you go into a college, it's people from all over. And not to have those resources that say, how do I navigate my own sexuality, and how do I navigate being in a place away from home and friends, and the challenges of day to day, and you still, sometimes you would get, forms of bullying in high school and forms of bullying in college, but there wasn't a place for a person to run to.
You talked about when you came out to your mom, or your mom, pulled you out, for lack of better, more so actually is what it sounds like to me. And you also said something earlier in the beginning of our conversation. You said in Panama that it's illegal to be gay.
Yeah.
And, it's like I was listening to somebody else earlier this week that was talking about how we have to reform, like, immigration and stuff like that. And he said, he's fine with any word that doesn't say a person's, we can't use a word saying a legal alien, because no person is illegal. Right. Like, a gay person, I think that part of what the society has thought is that not understanding that it's just part of who your being is, just as part of anything that is part of your intuition, part of what has made who your spirit is. And I was actually talking last week, a couple weeks ago, about like, I screwed it up about how like in Peter Pan had his shadow and Wendy like sewed his shadow back on in the play, in the movie. And it would be like, me like trying to remove like my shadow. Like, and funny enough, like I want to talk a little bit about some of like where you dove into from the turning points in your young adult years. And for me, it was like that shadow work. Actually, it's kind of a play on words. Is actually when I started doing that shadow work on this internalized homophobia, these internal fears. And now I can look back upon it, and especially since a lot of this has involved writing, so I can look at it, get it out when it's in between your ears. It has a lot of power over you, that negative self-talk. But when you start to put it down, you're like, oh, I would never talk to anybody that way, the way I talk or feel about myself. I don't want to assume what took place with that conversation with your mom. We don't necessarily have to talk about that, but just to give people, because where you're at today is not where you were 7-10 years ago. And I think it's important people to know, like, this person now who does so much amazing work, that where you were to where you are, how you got to where you are today, and where you were, and to kind of give people hope that maybe have been in your situation. Can we talk about like some of the low points in your life?
Yeah, I don't mind. I'm pretty much open book, and then I think that's where the beauty is, that we're able to kind of show and talk about the valley moments, and then talk about, okay, that's what catapult my growth and inspired, me to do this work. Yeah. So just kind of going back to, like I said, she didn't know in high school, but she did find out when I was in college, and came to pick me up one day, and, just had the gospel music playing in the back. And I'm like, what the world is going on here? And I just heard that you're gay, and now I know that you're gay. And that's why I didn't want you to play basketball. That's why I didn't want you to do this. I didn't make you this way. And just was crying, and it was just a very emotional moment, not only for her, but for me, because I'm like, what? Like, I'm just going home for the weekend, and, turn my world upside down. And, at the time, my mom did say a lot of hurtful things, things of, I know definitely she loves me and everything, and we've reconciled that relationship. But just back at that time, because of how, the queer community is portrayed, is like putting AIDS in the conversation. You're going to go to hell in the conversation. God didn't make you this way. She gave a really, really hard time, especially when it came to church. At that point, a Christian and going to a Christian church, you cannot wear those type of clothes. You cannot wear your hair like that. You cannot do this. Things like trying to have gender expression was denied. Like, or she would throw some clothes away. And I'm like, where's my clothes? Oh. So it's like, or, just kind of things that, we'll struggle with. And I know, like, maybe even like any type of listener here, but like putting certain clothes in your book bag to kind of, because you want to express yourself. And it's like, what do you got in that bag? Where are you going? What are you doing? So just being under that ridicule. And I think like that was around 18. My mom didn't actually come around to like my late 20s, like late 20s. So 10 years of, I had moments where I cut my hair off, and she was like, what in the world? And just she had a hard time coming to grips of who I was evolving to be. And it was just really, really challenging for her. And it was definitely challenging for me to navigate that space.
I wonder, for your mom, was it really more for the religious reasons, or do you think it was more that she was acting this way because of embarrassment to like others? Like she didn't know how to maybe talk about this or express who you were to like her friends?
Yeah, that's what I think. I think it's a little bit of both. I think one, religion, but sometimes that could be used as a crutch, deeper to what that they're feeling. And I think sometimes when people make a statement, they have to face the person in the mirror. So like at that time, she may have been judging other people's children and kind of like, my child wouldn't dare be that or do that. And to face the music as your child is gay, and that was an embarrassment for her, very, how do I face my friends? How do I did something. And I think she dealt with that a lot. Like, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
I didn't make you this way. So like, what did I do wrong? So I think it was like a lot of embarrassment and hurt.
We can't ever speak for somebody else's experience, right? And I'm really grateful that you and your mom have been able to reconcile your relationship, as you said earlier. At least I used to view my parents as like, I think we all view our parents as like the adult, like they're my mom and dad. And I don't have any kids. I got like 4 dogs, but and I got a nephew, like a couple, I got nieces and nephew actually. And I've seen friends now that have become, maybe what's actually helped me even more so is having like siblings that have become parents now.
Yeah.
And it's like, nothing magical happened. They didn't figure out everything and all of a sudden become a parent. And so I not to say that anything, I can't speak for your mother. I'm just thinking about some stuff with my parents I had to work through. It's like, I got to give them I give them some grace and understand the fact that they're all people. Hate's never right, or a person is never. But there's been so much lip service given to, especially in the 80s and 90s, when the AIDS epidemic happened, with fundamentalism and stuff like that. That it was, if that's the soup you're being fed, or that's what you're around, you kind of have to. Your environment has, at least for myself, my environment has so much effect of what I am, what my experiences are who of what I am today. And then being able to be like, when somebody says, "Oh, no, this isn't true," and then the second person, but then the third person tells me this isn't true, and they're qualified to speak on that subject, I need to start listening for myself. If that makes sense at all.
Definitely.
Did you have any depression or any like negative side effects, any like weight gain or anything, like any like self-harm that developed through any of this for yourself?
Yeah. And I think that's where the dark moments are. One, dealing with that with my mom, because I think we all, like you said earlier, we want to be accepted by our parents and our family and all of that. And my mom and I had a close relationship. It was just this one area of my life that was very hard for her. So for me, it became a sense, a thorn, a thorn definitely in my side. So yeah, and that kind of translated into the relationships that I was attracting, and getting involved with individuals that were basically not out as well. So it did cause a lot of depression in my 20s. I would be depressed, and I would go to church and try to pray the gay away, and because I wanted to reconcile this relationship with my mom. I wanted to, be accepted by, everyone. I wanted to be, wasn't quite sure if I could be in that type of relationship. So I was always in this ambiguous place. And that caused a lot of stress and depression. And I think like around like maybe closer to my late 20s, when around about that time she came to full acceptance of it, wasn't in my career. I just feel like I couldn't show up, the way that I wanted to confidently as a gay woman in the workplace, because of I didn't have anyone to help me with self-esteem, confidence, instill that in me. So, it was one thing with the workplace. At that time I had like gained like close to like 30 pounds, which was like, this is no longer a freshman 15. You've been out of college, girl. Like, what's going on? So I had, gained a lot of weight. I was just unhappy in my life, and it caused a lot of mental and emotional anguish. But at that time, we're not taught to go to a therapist really, or a counselor. And how dare you go to a counselor or therapist with the issue of being queer? And you just feel like a sense of that's non-existent. I can't go and talk to anyone about that. So I really didn't have any, really outlet. So yeah, that was a dark moment for me. Kind of withdrew from friends. In my private space, would do a lot of crying and a kind of lot of questioning. Why, God? Why did you make me this way? Why is my world falling apart? Maybe my mom is right. Maybe what people say about me is right. So it does take you to a dark and emotional space.
What would you say then was sort of that turning point for you? What changed everything and, help you sort of come around the corner?
Yeah. So I always like to tell people, like, I kind of had like even though like in my 20s, early 20s, was going to church, more progressive churches and getting closer to God, it just seemed like it was still a void. So when I was in that depressive state and I was being pushed, I think I can remember two specific incidences that kind of helped catapult my growth. And that was one, this whole time we were talking about my mom, but my dad, he wasn't in my day to day. My dad had his own life, and he was still in New York while we were down south. And my dad didn't know that I was gay. So like, I didn't really see my dad over like 10 years. He'll see me, sporadically. But when I did, I knew how to mask really good. So I knew how to change my clothes to look more feminine and act more feminine, so that it will kind of throw the whole thing off. So my dad didn't know that I was who I was. And I was, pleading to God, and I was like, man, God, what's going on, man? You got to talk to me. And at that point, I was kind of doing some stuff around my health, started getting better. And I could just remember this one time I was just crying in my living room. And I'm like, what am I here to do? What is my calling? I think that's where we get to that. Like, what am I here to do? And, I heard God said, I need you to go help people find purpose. And in that same breath, I said, okay, well, if you need me to do that, I can't. I'm gay. So how can I talk about God and purpose and gay all in? I can't do it. And for whatever reason, God knew what I needed. And God says, I need you to tell your father. Tell your father that. And I was in my head, I'm like, what the like, tell my father?
What?
I'm the only one in this living room. Like, what's going on? And I'm talking about in my spirit, I felt, and thought of that. So I called my brother up and I said, hey, I got to tell Daddy. I got to let him know that who I am. And he's like, why would you do that? And I said, I don't want him to ever leave this earth and not know my truth. I don't come to see him because of I'm ashamed, and he needs to know. He's like, all right, that's what you feel like you need to do. So I called my dad and I talked to him, and I was like, Dad, I got something to tell you. I said, I'm gay. His response, he didn't speak for a little while, like maybe a couple minutes. It's like felt like an eternity. He said, have a peace of mind. You're my baby. You have a peace of mind. Have a peace of heart. I will never turn my back on you.
Wow.
And that moment, I knew that God was speaking through my father to me, because, culture, my mom led me to believe like, no, you cannot never tell your dad. You'll have a heart attack. Don't ever tell him. And that God knew what I needed to hear through my father, that I love you. And those words from my dad always stuck, have a peace of mind, have a peace of heart. And my dad actually passed this past April. And when I think about him, I just think about like, man, I'm so glad that I had the courage and really leaned in and listened to God, because that was one of the greatest gifts that helped me accept who I am in this world.
We talk about that, like when the student's ready, the teacher appears. You surrender, like this wasn't working. Like you're thinking your thoughts weren't working, and you made room for that intuition, that what we would call it, voice, God, intuition, spirit, and then you followed that instruction. And like I don't think we honestly understand sometimes how much of like probably that was occupying your soul and suppressing you. Or I mean, I can't speak for you, but at least for myself in those situations, it's like, and what a gift that you got to have that conversation with your father. And my belief, my experience is per se, like, it's so wonderful that you had that from your father, but also the fact that sometimes the things don't always go that well, but there is still a peace of mind that comes with, because I'm standing in truth. Whether it's me, just even like a simple, like someone who's listening is like, okay, that's huge. There's no way. Like maybe it's a simple thing. Like when you get in the car and the Uber asks like, oh, you're going out to go meet up your boyfriend or your girlfriend, and you don't code switch, and you say, oh, I'm going to meet my boyfriend, or, I'm going to meet my girlfriend, and it's being truth in that. And just like taking those baby steps, because then I get a little bit more power and a little bit more steam to go on to do the next thing. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that more in the work you're doing today. But thank you so much for sharing that experience with your father.
Thank you for creating the space.
I know there was another story that you and I've talked before about when you were traveling for work, and you kind of had this other like God shot with a little bit of a parking situation. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, there's people going to be like, what kind of crazy stories is she having?
It's all right.
They're
used to that here.
I was doing, traveling for work, and after having, a long day teaching classes, pumping people up and motivating people and helping people actually live into their purpose, I would actually go to my hotel room and cry and still have like, oh man, okay, hey, the internalized homophobia, right? That even though I had that one gift from my dad, I was still dealing with the religious struggle. I was still dealing with the the remnants of that, right? And I'm still working through that. And my teammate says, hey, let's go out for dinner. So we team up, we go to dinner. And while we're driving to the location, we pull up to a parking that's like literally right there in front of the restaurant. And my teammate says, hey, let's actually go further up a couple blocks. And I'm like, there's a parking right here. Why would we want to go a couple blocks up? And when we go a couple blocks, I remember just kind of fumbling out the car. I dropped something. And when I drop something, I end up looking up, and I look up to this big mural on a church that says God loves all with a rainbow over it. And I was like, he was like, come on, Kay. And I'm like, standing there, and I'm like in awe and shocked, because little did my teammate know, or, I was just crying my heart out, and that's when God showed up again and say, hey, I hear you, and I love all. It's okay. So in that moment, I just knew that, like, God, you're with me through this whole process. You're with me in this journey. I'm not alone. And I find it to be that when we ask God or universe, or however we relate to it, whatever challenges that we're facing through, God knows you uniquely to bring the answer. So like through art, through books, through all these different things. And just God just found it, say, hey, this bureau a couple blocks up from this restaurant is where she's going to be able to find the answer and find some solace.
But it's also too, it's just being open, right? So you get to a point in your life where you're just open to hearing, you're asking for things, but then it's also just keeping that open mind. And all of a sudden it seems like those little signs, they just start appearing. They just start showing up, and not all at once and not in one big rush, but like Jeff, what you said, just they come as you need them slowly, because it's a journey and a process. And, not everything is going to shift, overnight. Sometimes I feel like, we would like to see things like that. I know myself, I'm guilty of that, but patience is, to sort of watch those things unfold as you are ready to move through them.
We hear how you leaned in and you did some of the work here, and there was obviously more work than that, but just out of the sense of time and being able to really share with some of the wonderful things that you're doing today. Something happened to you with this where you felt that you had to go share the good news with other people. I have to go back and help my brothers and sisters after I get well. And that leads you to starting a coaching practice that you do now. You do one-on-one, you do in groups, you speak publicly as well. Can we talk about the work you're doing now to help the LGBTQI community?
Yeah, I'd love to. Like, and let's just say, as a conservative time, so like not dealing with that for years, and then going in a space of close to 5 years of doing a lot of inner work, right? The hibernation stage, and what a lot of people don't see, and being able to now provide a space or a level of wisdom to now say, hey, you don't, unless if you, and I don't think anybody wants to go through that. I've found the answer. And I found the space of how we can heal. And, I help the queer community. Like, it's all about love. It's all about, helping someone find freedom, because I know what it is. Like I said, being in that living room and, you're mentally and emotionally anguished. But the work I do is not necessarily pointing someone to a religion or pointing someone to a book or anything. As I shared, when you start, and I think Anthony said this earlier, like when you start making yourself more open, and that's the journey that a client and we go through, is how can you go through inquiry, and really asking God, and really starting to maybe question a little bit of what you've been taught. Because sometimes we have to ask ourselves, like, what we've been taught, is it really serving? Is it serving my well-being? And if it's not, how can I do life differently? So it's more of helping people unify their spirituality, their sexuality, right? We've been taught in religion, in a lot of churches, you're an abomination, you're going to hell. Or if more progressively over the past years, you may not be going to hell, but you are separate from God. You cannot be married, or you cannot love like everyone else. And that breaks someone's heart. That notion that you're separate from God, you can't get help from a divine source to help you get the job, or find the loved one, or find your deeper meaning in life, your purpose. You're just feeling like you're doing life on your own, and it's to help individuals say, hey, you don't have to do life on your own, and to help people understand that you don't necessarily have to, being sitting in church, dying inside, nor do you have to totally leave your faith community and just say, you know what, I'm gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't need God. Where is the middle road of how can you experience God in a new way? So that's what I work with clients with, is how do you experience God to the best of your understanding and, build a new relationship.
I think you said something important, and it's worth repeating, is that these statements, these proclamations, they come from religion. So though not necessarily coming from God, we're not hearing these messages directly from, God or the universe or however you call that being. It's the religious constructs of you're going to go to hell, or you're disconnected to God, you can't be married, all of those things. How do you differentiate with a client on, like, how do you sort of move someone past that process where you can disconnect these, rules or regulations from religion and move someone into a more positive state of well-being when it comes to these things that they're dealing with?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Anthony. With that, I find myself to be spiritually inclusive. So I no longer identify necessarily as a Christian, but more spiritually inclusive. So helping a client in a connected way that it's a spiritual environment, and hoping that most clients that come to me, that's what they're dealing with, their spirituality and their sexuality, this whole notion of God and religion. But I think it's power when we ask ourselves questions. So it's not a coaching session, me giving you advice and telling you my story, right? That could be motivational, but getting to the basis of your story. And that's the thing. We're storytellers, right? We tell stories because we want to navigate. We're beautiful at it. You talk to a 3-year-old, they'll tell you a whole story. But is a story that you've been told, is it serving you well? Right? Is it in helping a person sit with that? This whole notion of the relationship between you and God, is it positive?
Yeah.
Is it helping you be fruitful in life? Is it helping you help humanity? Is it helping you get out of bed?
Wow.
And when a person could, hear their own response and say, you know what, no, and helping a person decipher, and that's through education as well, helping a person understand religion. The original intent of religion was supposed to be a space of love, right? I truly believe that God knew that we were going to come here and that we needed a little bit of help. We needed a Siri. And through these sacred texts, they were supposed to kind of help. But when you have mankind involved, those individuals that wrote the Bible and other sacred texts, they were just like us.
Right.
They were just like us. They were going through hardships. They were going through depression. And it's how one perceived God, how one experienced God. And in religion is more of trying to implement laws and a guide.
Right.
So, but it's going to the basis of asking a client, is the story that you're telling yourself, is it serving you well? And if it's not, in what ways can we work and brainstorm of reframing that story for you to live into your purpose, for you to be the better version of yourself, right? And recreating a new narrative.
When I was maybe 13 or 14, my parents got divorced. And at that time, we were very heavily involved in the parish that we belonged to. I think at the time, my mom was maybe even working there, or maybe we were just involved in the parish. And I remember the pastor told my mom that she was still welcome to come to church, but she no longer could receive communion because she was a sinner. And if she wanted to receive communion, she would have to go to confession and confess her sin of divorce. And I remember my mom was a very, I would say, level-headed person. She's no longer with us, but she was just, very straight to the point and very kind, loving, caring. And we were with her when the pastor told us this, and in the nicest way possible, she basically told him to fuck off. And because of
That's
this,
right.
and I saw this as, a 13, 14-year-old kid. And when we left, we got home and she said, we're not going to church anymore. We don't need this. But we still went to Catholic. I still went on to Catholic high school. My sister did as well. I went to a Catholic college. And, her thing was, you have a foundation. You have this idea of what, religion is, spirituality is. You have the fundamentals, like the good things, be kind to one another, the things that we use sort of in our, day-to-day life. And because of watching her sort of stand up for herself with no fear, just knowing that this was not going to serve us anymore, this community, if we're being judged because she got divorced, because it was the wrong relationship for her to be in, and she would not be able to thrive as a human being any longer, staying in that relationship. Watching that, I realized that the church has no power over me. What really it boils down to, where the power is my connection with the universe or God, or however you want to call that being. That's where the real power is. So it's using those amazing tools, because like Jeff said, especially in Catholicism, there are some really great life tools that are built in, but it's using those things and sort of moving yourself forward. I love that that's sort of the premise of how you work is, if this isn't going to serve me anymore, or if this isn't working for me, how do we fix it, or how do we change it? And I know for myself, at a young age, we sort of, I say this, but we sort of stepped away from the church. And I feel like I have a wonderful spiritual relationship, with this higher power. And I think it's definitely okay that you don't have to be connected to an entity that doesn't accept you and love you for who you really are, because that's really what church, going to church or religion, that's really what that's all about.
Yeah. Yeah. You could have not said it any better.
Yeah, Coach Kate, you used a word that I really stuck out, and I was like, I use a different word for it, but it's the same thing. Well, I used the word inventory, but you used the word inquiry.
Mm.
And I love that because, I think any spirit, any living being can benefit from an inquiry. And we're so quick to use these things in technology, in business, peer reviews and stuff like that. Like the thing that's supposed to be the thing that we're using to develop as far as who our soul and our core is, why would we want not to do the same thing? Like to be, because creation, like you talk about these stories and, instead of being able to be like, oh, miracles used to take place 2,000 years ago. Like, no, it's still happening now. And now you get to be invited into that and be fully of what is inside of you and shine and be part of that creation. Like that's where it's like, oh, I could talk for an hour about that. Like that makes it. Just out of curiosity, with this process, do you find that you continue to do inquiries for yourself as you've evolved and grown in life?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of those things. If you feel like, oh man, you've arrived, and that's the thing about this work. I'm not. I've gotten to the other side of it, in the healing space of it, in the light of it. But I'm still continuously growing and letting my clients know that you're going to continuously grow.
Yeah.
And a lot of the growing that you're going to do is unraveling a lot of the things that your belief systems, and sometimes that could be a little bit challenging, like, and it's going back to that space is, are these belief systems that you're ingrained with, are they serving you? Right. And saying, what does freedom look like for you? And I'm in a therapy program, or marriage family therapy. I'm studying to do that as well, because through my own healing, I started to understand that as a coach is not always about going future oriented, right? And say, hey, let's pick up from here and go forward. But it's a lot of unraveling that we have to do from our childhood too.
Yeah.
And understanding a lot around religious trauma. And so there's a researcher, Dr. Marlene Winnell. She does a lot of this and work and giving us language around some of the experiences that we've had with religion, right? And how sometimes it can be the toxic theology can hold us back and help how can we get into a space of autonomy in our own lives and say, I want to incorporate God, but how do I navigate this thing? So yes, I continuously grow, and when those things that may have triggered me in the past come up, it's a little bit different. And I think one of the biggest things that has helped me tremendously is meditation,
Mm.
meditation and mindfulness. And we don't really teach that in the Christian church. We teach prayer, dialogue. You ask God what you want, right? That God's a vending machine. But we don't really teach of how to sit. And I think that's the thing about when you get to a space of trying to be more spiritually inclusive, you're able to bring in other concepts and ideas around how can I, meditate, or how can I be mindful and watch my thoughts, and be able, when you're able to watch your thoughts as with my clients and observe your thoughts, that's when you're able to say, is that true for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that coupled with, like, I know you all are big fans of Byron Katie, but she, through the inquiry, that's where the change and the shift happens, when you say, man, is that true?
Yeah.
Is that working for me? And if it's not, how can I turn it around?
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say that to me, that is, like, if you want to use the word God or spirit, like, that's me turning my will over to my higher power, to God, and really what God's will is.
Yeah.
And then being able to show up, and then, because living in truth and honesty, that's the whole beauty of this inquiry, this process. And then the word I would also say is an expression happens. I'm expressing who I am. And and then sometimes words to me are just amaze me. It's like, okay, what is the opposite of depression? It's expression. It's like, oh, no wonder I was depressed for so many years. I wasn't expressing for so many years. I was told, oh, don't play with the dolls, don't play with the Barbies. Don't, be careful when you're out there doing figure skating, so that your wrist is not limp, or whatever it is. But I can still be out there playing hockey, and I love both those things, and they both bring me joy. And that's that freedom you kind of talked about. When we spoke to your father, and you kind of like had that thing that you needed. And I hear that now. It sounds like, with the work that you do with your clients, the giving back is that you also receive as well in the process.
Yeah. As long as a teacher student, and part of the process is a 3-part process. Not only am I in the room and you're in the room, but if we allow intuition, God in you, to stir up the responses and stir up what needs to be healed.
Yeah.
And I'm learning, with every client is different. I'm learning more about them. I'm learning more about the scope of the world, and it's a healing process. And it affirms, man, things come up that a client may say that I've been dealing with. Oh man, you've been able to work through that.
Yeah.
Pass that forward to them, and then they turn and become the teacher and the student as well. So it's constantly a cycle of helping a client anchor themselves to their purpose, and learning how to use that as a motivator. So it's always, like I said, it's always a teacher student moment.
What you're saying, I think, is even bigger and more universal. What I'm thinking is like, there's sort of this notion, going back to what you said, like, okay, I've done the work and now I've arrived. I'm here, and now I don't have to do anything else, or grow or change or move, through anything else. And I think in so many other places of our life, personal life, work life, career, relationships with family and friends, everything is always changing and constantly evolving. And, like, look at last year, just the year of 2020, just how everything had to shift and change in order for us to, accommodate what was happening in the world. I look at, even for Jeff and I, we also have an event production company. And last year we had to make a shift. We had to pivot from live in-person events to work with our partners on how to figure out how to produce events virtually. I look at us, with the show, it's, every interview we do, I think we get a little bit better, and we change and we grow and we learn something from it. So I think what you're saying, is also just sort of a universal truth that in our lives, from all facets of it, that, change can be scary. I know for myself, I sometimes, Jeff will attest to this, I sometimes, I'm very cautious or pump the brakes. Jeff likes to kind of throw his hands up in the air and just kind of go with it. But, I'm more, I'm learning that you just kind of have to, move, kind of go with the flow and let things evolve. I think, though, what happens is there's sort of this lie that we're told somewhere along the line that it's like you go to school, you get a good job, you get married, you have kids, and then you buy your house and like you live your life. That's what it is. And I think now, there is sort of this bigger spiritual awakening happening in the world where it's like where people are realizing that it's a constant evolution and that we have to continue to grow and change and adapt, because if we don't, the world we're just going to be left behind. So I just wanted to point that out, because as you were talking through this, I think it's just important to say that it's a universal truth as well. We were talking earlier about some of the principles that you work with your clients. Can we walk through some of the principles that you use to work with your clients?
Yeah, we'd love to do that. So more of one of the principles is more of a kind of like a framework. So I feel that when I've gone through my healing, and I was like, man, there's not really a blueprint. There's really no kind of manual. You have therapy, you have these different modalities, but how do you help a client that wants to unify their spirituality and sexuality and be able to cater to them in a way that I may have clients that want to stay in their faith communities. That's perfectly fine. I have clients that say, hey, I want to evolve my spiritual growth. I want to be open to different practices, or I'm just questioning a lot of things, and that's fine, and creating that safe space for them. So like more of the framework is being able to help individuals, what I call is like more through a power of intentionality, and helping them understand and navigate, one, anchoring themselves to a purpose, right? So that's one of the principles that I teach is around purpose. A lot of the times when we are having a challenge in life, especially I'll speak in the context of the challenges that we face as a queer community, we've been taught that we don't have a purpose, that we've been like, you're an abomination, you're going to hell, we don't know why you're here. You're not really included to come to certain churches unless if you go to an affirming church. It makes it hard for someone. So helping someone understand and reframe their story around God's purpose for their life, or that co-creative process with them and God working on a purpose, and helping someone identify what that purpose is. Once they're able to identify, say, okay, I've anchored myself into something, that becomes the motivator, right? That becomes the motivator, as in, I now know that I have purpose. I can come out. Yeah. I can show up confidently at work. I can actually be in a relationship.
Right. Yeah. And I would say to anyone, to me, that's just, it's like, that's that foundation, that then everything else that you just talked about, work, life, it all is then built on top of that firm foundation.
Well, and then going back to what you were saying earlier, when you were like in your late 20s, right? So all of a sudden, once you start getting into alignment, like your career turns around, your weight turns around, your mental health turns around. I mean, everything then all of a sudden shifts and sort of realigns, and it's like, okay, here I am. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, and as I say, like, hey, I'm ready to go. I want to play, coach. I want to get into the game of life.
And that's when it gets fun, no? Like, at least, and it can be scary. I mean, to be fair, like I know that kind of like sweaty palm feeling you get. I know when I've done stuff like that, but I know on the other side of those sweaty palms, there's like butterflies. So just tell
you're ready to kind of step in there. So that's one of the anchor process. Like, so I walk a person through that. We go through the discovery process of, your purpose, and then we move on to building a vision. Right? Okay. So it's very important that an individual has a vision for them, vision for their life, vision for themselves, right? You got to be able to see what's in front of you. Otherwise, that you're going to stay in that depressive state or a mental or emotional anguish. You're not going to be able to see anything. So through the inquiry is, what is it that you want to experience? Mm-hmm. What is ideal for you in your life? And in the client coming to the revelation of what that is.
That all makes so much sense and I think also is like, I'm curious to ask you, because I'm not a coach. As you've worked with clients, people come back and say, oh, you know what, Coach K, like, hey, we wrote down this and this, but I've been out there like living life now, working on some of the things, and I realized maybe that we're going to tweak this a little bit. Is there space for that?
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. That's where I think Anthony was speaking about earlier. You got to just allow things to flow. Right. And it's a living thing. Like your purpose, your vision is a living thing. Where we get caught up is that, oh man, you're not giving yourself organic way to grow. You're going to change. You're going to evolve. You're going to be different. Your purpose may be different at a particular age than it is when you're, doing something different when you're married, when you have kids, when you have different callings. So we work through that process, and then we get into the last principle, which is really action. Right. The action space. So that's what really coaching is all about. Right. Is one thing. It's not going to come. You're going to sit on a couch and say, "Oh, this is my life story." We understand that, right? But what is it now that you want? You want to get in the driver's seat and take action. And what is those small steps? And I think, Jeff, you were mentioning that earlier, that maybe you're in a car with an Uber driver, and instead of code switching, how can you make a small step with you feel in a safe space? Like, yeah, I'm going here with my boyfriend, or my girlfriend, or I'm non-binary, or what is those small steps? What are those small wins, and really helping the client, really achieve those small wins.
Yeah.
There's really something powerful when I'm listening, to all of these steps and just sort of thinking about, these principles. We do these things in so many other, parts of our lives, where I'm just thinking about, like, in business, right? When you're writing a business plan. So it's sort of like there has to be an incubation period, right? Where you're figuring out what it is that we're doing. What are we trying to accomplish? What is this thing that we want to create? Then that leads to creating a mission statement, which leads to creating goals, which leads to creating strategy, and then an action plan. And I say this because I just think so many times in other parts of our lives, we do these things, we do this work. And when it comes to ourselves, we don't always think that it's okay to do this self-work, this self-healing, this self-practice. And just the more we see it, the more, the similarities come to light more and more, because it really all is sort of the same thing. But taking the point that I want to really drive here is, taking action is, I think, really what's key. Is once you know and understand who you are and what it is that you want in your life, you have to take action. There's, people say, well, I've, figured out that I want this, but it's like, well, that's great to have like a dream, but unless you have an action plan, it's never going to come into fruition. It's never going to, to evolve. So being present and being able to take that action and move through it, that's what really sort of creates the change in your own life, which will then create, your, change within your environment around you, and, hopefully the world around you.
You could have said it better, Anthony. And that's the pivotal moment, right? Is really helping someone get into that action space. And really, what is your action on how you want to recreate the relationship with you and God? Right? What is a spirituality? Like, how can you unite? Because sometimes we think God is external. How do we open our minds to how do you want what is the vision for your spirituality? How do you want to experience that? And really dialing down and getting awareness of the limiting beliefs. So it's definitely a process, but walking individuals through that process, I found the most success in really saying, man, I took action. I may have been having society or my family enforcing choices on me, but really helping the individual step into that space of I'm making the choice. And I have a driver, I have a purpose, I have a motivator that's helping me make these choices and stick with them.
We speak the same language of the heart as you, Coach K, and we're so glad to share this time with you. We could talk definitely longer. I think really what we can do is we can encourage people to connect with you. You have first of all, can we talk about your Instagram handle? Can you tell everyone what that is, please? Because it's amazing.
Yes. So the Instagram handle is Queer on Purpose, and I think it's very, very important that we as a queer community know that God has created us on purpose and with a purpose. So to help people really live into that, like, man, my life has purpose, and to be proud, and God wants to show its diversity through us. So so Queer on Purpose.
Yeah, and we're going to have Anthony does a wonderful job with putting together profiles for all of our guests online, and everyone will be able to connect with you there, and also at Queer on Purpose on Instagram, and there'll be more links to also some wonderful books that you recommend as well, and you also have a wonderful website that we'll have on our site as well too. We just really want to thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and we thank you for the work that you're doing and how you're helping others, and just the joy that you're continuing to spread in the world. And I just want to pause, because for all of us, like, sometimes people listen, it's like, oh, we all took a little bit of step here and there, to get where we are today. And that I didn't know you. If we hadn't pivoted to having this conversation online with COVID, we necessarily wouldn't be having this conversation today. So I'm really grateful that you've taken the action in your lives and that it's brought us together here on our paths that they've crossed together today for this time. So thank you so much for how you showed up in the world.
Awesome. And thank you both for doing what you're doing for the community and allowing us the space to tell our stories. And I'll hope that is inspiration. So thank you for having me. And thank you to all the listeners for spending the time today.
Oh, all right. Well, thanks again. And till we meet again, be well.
All right, you too.
The tools that Coach K discussed are available to everyone. Understanding what you want your life to look like, visualizing it, and creating an action plan to achieve it. You too can actualize the life that you want for yourself. Be sure to visit Coach K's profile on our website at www.talkoutloudlive.com to get connected with her and her teachings. Thanks for listening to this episode of Talk Out Loud. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe, rate us, and share with a friend. You can also follow us on social media at Talk Out Loud Live. If you or someone you know has an inspirational story and a member of the LGBTQIA+ community, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us on our website at www.talkoutloudlive.com. On our website, you can also catch up on past episodes, learn more about our past guests, and browse their profiles. You can also get your official Talk Out Loud gear in our online store and browse our online bookstore curated with our guests' recommended books. Thanks again for listening, and remember, be true, be you, and to talk out loud.